Hello. I'm Gabriel. Last year I finished an animation inspired by The Neverhood. The Neverhood is a point-and-click adventure game made in 1996, and if you haven't seen this animation yet, you can do it right now. It's over there and in the description. And I'm making this video because I think some of you may be interested in behind the scenes process of this project. In the beginning I have to make a little disclaimer. I'm not a pro, I have never worked in the animation industry, so some solution I used may not be technically correct, but they worked for me. So if you notice them, you can share your knowledge in comment. And another disclaimer, I'm not an owner of rights to the Neverhood franchise, and it's only a fan art non-profit project, and I won't continue any work on that franchise. A few years ago, when I started learning 3D graphics, mostly in Blender, I thought it might be fun to make some animation project with a more story, and as I consider The Neverhood as my favorite game of childhood, I made this little storyboard with Clayman escaping the game that is played on smartphone, and at the beginning I had to create Clayman character. I started from making base shape of metaballs and then converted it into mesh and started sculpting it with Dyntopo. You can see that I constantly look at the reference image displayed in software called PureRef. There was a lot of sculpting, and as you can see I used different sculpt brushes and also have some sculpt brushes downloaded from internet, but I think today I would use only a default sculpt brushes that are available in the newest version of Blender. After finishing sculpting, I started retopology with the help of Subsurf and Shrink Wrap modifier. And at that point I was still often returning to sculpting stage to make some shape tweaks. And at that point I have to thank Ravenok, who made the entire first 2 rooms of the game, and you can play it in Unreal Engine. And at some points when I didn't know what to do, I looked at his records of streams. As far as I know, he wants to publish them, but he wants to make them more easy to look at it, because it's long hours of just recorded streams. And to create PBR texture set of plasticine material, I used Substance bitmap to material, and on working at it I also followed Ravenok's streams, because it was first time I used that software. And with generated height map used as a sculpting brush, I added some details, and because I used Shrink Wrap modifier, the low poly version of model almost automatically updated. Of course I had to repair some issues. And after finishing retopology, I created an UVs and exported model to Substance Painter, where I made all materials except albedo texture, which was done in GIMP, because I didn't know how to do it fast and accurate in Substance Painter back then. I made a simple rig and used automatic weight painting at the start. I made inverse kinematics setup and started posing the model. I also created simple first room of the game and done simple test animation that is also available on my YouTube channel. It was September 2018, and at that point, after uploading my test animation, I abandoned this project for a while because I wanted to learn different stuff. But I returned to the project in 2019, and in November I started animating, as you can see in new version of Blender. And the main rule I had was to make animation with respect to classical stop-motion animation rules. So while a whole video is recorded in 25 FPS, because I had my camera set in that frame rate when I was recording, but Clayman and all Clay elements are moving on twos, so are moving every second frame of animation. But motion tracking of camera is done on once, so every frame of video is tracked and camera moves always. Again, I made a break from this project and fast forward to April 2020. I'm sitting a bit bored at home during remote school and I thought I should finish my Clayman project, so I continued to work on animation. As you can see, my original model was not perfect, so I had to tweak some weight painting during animation process. I made Clayman's trunk as a simple mesh with plasticine material, and all the objects that appear and disappear in animation are just scaled down to 0 to make them invisible. You can later see the water and clay elements are made the same way. The smartphone model that you can see is also made by me in Blender and textured in Substance Painter, and it's a recreation of my real phone. It's LG Spirit, and in final animation I used ScanVM to run my game. It's my phone model, and as you can see, all materials are done as BBR textures in Substance Painter. Display surface is extra flat object under the glass part, and in animation this material is set to hold out. At the end of animating, I made his hair follow a movement of the head and added few eye blinks to make Clayman looks more alive.
Thirsty. I need Wawa. Thirsty. I need Wawa. Thirsty. Wawa. Thirsty. Wawa.
As I said, water climation also use a trick with scaling down unwanted objects to 0 and sculpting one mesh for every second frame of animation, because as I said, I'm animating on tools. Here I keyframed every second frame of movement of Clayman and then changed the interpolation type to constant. I probably could use some animation modifier, but I didn't know how to do it more efficient back then. Here I made a bolt of lightning with a simple mesh and distorted that with an animated displacement map. And also I added some glow to it in compositing. After the last mesh tweaks, with help of my sister, we recorded live action footage for my animation, and I didn't make any tracking points on a table, so motion tracking was not accurate and I spent a lot of hours making it look better, but still when you watch this animation you can see that 3D elements are a bit floating on my table, but I thought it's good enough for a short film made by hobbyist, and in fact I think sometimes you have to give up some perfection because at the end most of people won't notice them. Of course, for some professional project I would have to make it look better, but as it's a little short video it can be a bit messy. And the last thing to animate was clay animation of these pieces of clay. The same day we were shooting a video, I captured a spherical panorama photo on my phone to use it as an environment texture in Blender. And to make better lighting I also used 3 area lights that match windows in my living room, so it's light the same way that the table is light in real life. I rendered everything in Blender Cycles with 128 samples and put it in DaVinci Resolve, where I made montage, sound design and color correction. And I also rendered a part of animation where you can see only Clayman, because I made a screen of my phone invisible and I exported extra alpha layer, and then under the screen I put parts of Clayman to look like it's really going from screen to real life. It's the final Blender scene. It starts at 31st frame because it's a frame when 3D objects enter a camera range, and you can see it's animated on tools. And when we click on some clay piece, we can see that it's in scale 1, but when I go to frame when it disappears, it's scaled to 0. And that's how every element of clay is done. Clayman have also some shape keys, because the shape of his shoulders is getting distorted while he is moving, and I use it to tweak it. I used sounds that were extracted from original game, and I found there on this web page, and as you can see it's all the sounds in wave format. And that's how I made my Clayman animation. If you ask me how much time it took me to finish the project, I have to say I don't know how many hours it was exactly, but it was a lot of work, and I think I learned a lot during that project, and I had a lot of fun watching final result. I hope you enjoyed that video, and you can let me know in comments what you think about my animation. And for now, thanks for watching, and I hope see you next time.